Percy the Small Engine by the Reverend W. Audrey. Read and adapted by Joshua Boston. Percy and the Signal. Percy is a little green tank engine who works hard in the yard at the big station. He is a funny little engine, and he loves playing jokes. But sometimes these jokes get him into trouble. Peep, peep, he whistled one morning to Gordon. Hurry up, Gordon, the train's ready. Gordon thought he was late and came puffing out at once. Ha 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 ha, laughed Percy and showed him a train of dirty coal cars. Instead of going back to the shed, Gordon wondered how he could pay Percy out. Next, Percy saw James and played a joke on him. Stay in the shed today, James. Sir Topham Hatt will come and see you. Ah, thought James conceitedly. Sir Topham Hatt knows I'm a really splendid engine, ready for anything. He must want me to pull a special train. So James stayed where he was, and neither his driver or fireman could make him move. But Sir Topham Hatt never came, and the other engines grumbled dreadfully. They had to do James's work as well as their own. At last, the inspector arrived. Show a wheel, James, he said crossly. You can't stay here all day. Sir Topham Hatt told me to stay here, answered James sulkily. He sent a message this morning. He did not, retorted the inspector. How could he? He's away for a week. Oh, said James. Oh, and he came quickly out of the shed. Where's Percy? Percy had wisely disappeared. When Sir Topham Hatt came back, he did see Percy and James. Both engines wished that he didn't, for he was so cross with both of them for causing so much trouble. But the very next day, Percy was still being cheeky. James and Gordon wanted to try and pay Percy out, but he kept out of their way until later that morning. He was so excited that he forgot to be careful. I say, you two engines, he said, I'm to take some freight cars to Thomas's Junction. Sir Topham Hatt chose me especially. He must know that I am a really useful engine. More likely he wants you out of the way, grunted James. Gordon looked over and winked at James. They were going to play a trick on Percy. Ah, yes, said James. Just so. You were saying, Gordon? James and I were just speaking about signals at the junction. We can't be too careful about signals, but then I needn't say that to a really useful engine like you, Percy. Percy felt flattered. No, of course not, he said. We had spoken of backing signals, put in James. They need extra special care, you know. Would you like me to explain? No, thank you, James, said Percy airily. I know all about signals. And he bustled off importantly. James and Gordon sullenly exchanged winks. Percy was a little worried as he set out. I wonder what backing signals are, he thought. Never mind, I'll manage. I know all about signals. He puffed crossly to his freight cars and felt better. Just outside the station, Percy saw a signal. Bother, he said. It's a danger. Ah! Oh! Eek! Ah! Screamed the cars as they bumped into each other. Presently, the signal moved to show line clear, but its arm moved up instead of down. Percy had never seen that kind of signal before. He was surprised. Down means go, and up means stop. So upper still, he thought, must mean go back. I know, it's one of those backing signals. How clever of me to find that out. Come on, Percy, said his driver. Off we go. But Percy wouldn't go forward, and his driver had to let him back in order to start at all. I am clever, thought Percy. Even my driver doesn't know about backing signals. And he started so suddenly that the freight car screamed again. "Whoa, Percy!" called his driver. "Stop! You're going the wrong way!" "But it's a backing signal!" Percy protested and told him about Gordon and James. The driver laughed and explained about signals that point up. "Oh dear," said Percy. "Let's start quickly before they come and see us." He was too late. Gordon swept by with the express. He had seen everything. That night in the sheds, the big engines talked about nothing but signals. They thought that the subject was funny. They laughed a lot, but Percy thought that they were being very silly. Duck takes charge. "Do you know what?" asked Percy. "What?" grunted Gordon. "Do you know what?" "Silly," said Gordon. "Of course I don't know what, if you don't tell me what is." "Sir Topham Hatt says that the work in the yard is too heavy for me. He's getting a bigger engine to help me." "Rubbish," said James. "Any engine could do it. If you worked more and chattered less, this yard would be a sweeter, a better, and a happier place." Percy then went off to fetch some coaches. "That stupid old signal," he thought. "No one listens to me now. They think I'm a silly little engine and order me about. I'll show him! I'll show him!" He puffed as he ran about the yard. But he didn't know how. Things went wrong. The coaches and cars behaved badly, and by the end of the afternoon, he felt tired and unhappy. He took some coaches to the station and stood panting at the end of the platform. "Hello, Percy," said Sir Topham Hatt. "You look tired." "Yes, sir. I am, sir. I can't tell whether I'm standing on my dome or my wheels." "You look the right way up to me," laughed Sir Topham Hatt. "Cheer up. The new engine is bigger than you and can probably do the work alone. Meanwhile, would you like to help build my new harbor at Thomas's Junction? Thomas and Toby will help, but I need an engine there all the time." "Oh, yes, sir. Thank you, sir," said Percy happily. The new engine arrived the next morning. "What's your name?" asked Sir Topham Hatt kindly. "Montague, sir, but I'm usually called Duck. They call me that because they say I waddle. I don't really, sir, but I like Duck better than Montague." "Good," said Sir Topham Hatt. "Duck it shall be. Here, Percy, show Duck around, please." The two engines went off together. Soon they were very busy. At first, the freight cars played tricks, but soon found that playing tricks on Duck was a grave mistake. The coaches behaved well, though Gordon, James, and Henry did not. They watched Duck quietly doing his work. "He seems a simple sort of engine," they whispered. "We'll have some fun and order him about." "Quack, quack, 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 wheeze!" they wheezed as they passed him. Smoke billowed everywhere. Percy was cross, but Duck took no notice. "They'll get tired of it soon," he said. Presently, the three engines began to order Duck about. Duck stopped. "Do they tell you to do things, Percy?" he asked. "Yes, they do," answered Percy sadly. "Right," said Duck. "We'll soon stop that nonsense." He whispered something. "We'll do it tonight." Sir Topham Hatt had had a good day. There had been no grumbling passengers, all the trains had run to time, and Duck had worked well in the yard. Sir Topham Hatt was looking forward to hot buttered toast for tea at home. He had just left the office when suddenly he heard an extraordinary noise. "Wheesh!" "Bother," he said, and hurried to the yard. Gordon, James, and Henry were wheeshing and snorting furiously, while Duck and Percy calmly sat on the points outside the shed, refusing to let the engines in. "Stop that noise!" bellowed Sir Topham Hatt. "Now, Gordon." "They won't let us in," hissed the big engine crossly. "Duck, explain this behavior." "Oh, beg pardon, sir, but I'm the Great Western Engine, and we Great Western Engines do our work without fuss. But we are not ordered about by other engines. You, sir, are our controller. Percy and I will gladly move if you ask us to, but, begging your pardon, sir, Percy and I would be glad if you would inform these, engines that we only take orders from you. The three big engines hissed angrily. Silence! Snapped Sir Topham Hatt. Duck and Percy, I am pleased with your work today, but not your behavior tonight. You have caused a disturbance. Gordon, James, and Henry sniggered, but stopped suddenly when Sir Topham Hatt angrily turned on them. As for you, he thundered, you've been worse. You made the disturbance. Duck is quite right. This is my railway, and I give the orders. When Percy went away, Duck was left to manage alone, and he did so easily. Percy and Harold. Percy worked hard at the harbor. The workmen needed stone for their building. Toby helped, but sometimes the loads of stone were too heavy, and Percy had to fetch them himself. Then he would push the freight cars to the quay where the workmen needed the stone. Sometimes he would see Thomas, who often said, Well done, Percy. Sir Topham Hatt is very pleased with us. An airfield was close by, and Percy heard the airplane zooming overhead all day. The noisiest of all was a helicopter, which hovered, buzzing like an angry bee. Stupid thing, said Percy. Why can't it go and buzz somewhere else? One day, Percy stopped by the airfield. The helicopter was standing quite close. Hello, said Percy. Who are you? I'm Harold. Who are you? I'm Percy. What whirly great arms you've got. They're nice arms, said Harold, offended. I can hover like a bird. Don't you wish you could hover? Certainly not. I like my rails, thank you. I think railways are slow, said Harold in a bored voice. They're not much use and quite out of date. He whirled his arms and buzzed away. Percy found Toby at the top station, arranging freight cars. I say, Toby, he burst out, that Harold, that stuck-up whirlybird thing, says I'm slow and out of date. Just let him wait. I'll show him. He collected his freight cars and started off, still fuming. Soon above the clatter of the cars, they heard a familiar buzzing. Percy, whispered the driver. There's Harold. He's not far ahead. Let's race him. Yes, let's, said Percy excitedly, and quickly gathering speed, he shot off down the line. The conductor's wife had given him a flask of tea for elevensies. He had just poured out a cup when the van lurched and spilled it down his uniform. He wiped up the mess with his handkerchief and staggered to the front platform. Percy was pounding along down the line. The cars screamed and swayed, while the van rolled and pitched like a ship at sea. Well, I'll be a ding-dong-dang, said the conductor. Then he saw Harold buzzing alongside, and then he understood. A race was on. Go it, Percy, he yelled. You're gaining. Percy had never been allowed to run fast before. He was having the time of his life. Hurry, 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 he panted to the cars. We don't want to, we don't want to, they grumbled. It was no use. Percy was bucketing along with flying wheels, and Harold was high and alongside. The fireman shoveled for dear life, while the driver was so excited he could hardly keep still. Well done, Percy, he shouted. We're gaining! We're going ahead! Oh, good boy! Good boy! Far ahead, a distant signal warned them that the harbor wharf was near. Beep, beep, beep! Brakes, conductor, please! Shutting off steam and using Percy's brakes as well, the driver checked the train's headlong speed. They rolled under the main line and halted smoothly on the wharf. "Oh, dear," groaned Percy. "I'm sure we've lost." The fireman scrambled to the cab roof. "We've won! We've won!" he shouted, and nearly fell off in his excitement. "Harold's still hovering! He's looking for a place to land!" "Listen up, boys!" the fireman called out. "Here's a song for Percy!" Said Harold Helicopter to our Percy, "You are slow. Your railway is out of date and not much use, you know. But Percy with his stone cars did the trip in record time, and we beat the helicopter on our old branch line." The driver and conductor soon caught the tune, and so did the workman on the key. Percy loved it. "Oh, thank you," he said. He liked the last line best of all, and was a very happy engine. A Scarf for Percy. It was a cold winter's morning on the island of Sodor. The wind was bitter and the ground hard with frost. Thomas and Percy were cold and cross. "All I want is a warm boiler," huffed Thomas. "Firelighter knows that. He's late." "He's not late," replied Percy. "This weather just woke us up early." Gusts of wind swirled snow around the shed, tossing huge flakes of snow toward Thomas. Then they swooshed around Percy, too. "Why don't we talk about something else?" shivered Percy. "Yes," replied Thomas, "like how silly we'll look when our funnels start to turn into icicles." "That's not funny. Maybe we'll stop feeling cold if we talk about warm things, like sunshine and steam." "And firelighters," muttered Thomas. "Scarves," continued Percy. "Scarves?" laughed Thomas. "That's what you need, Percy, a woolly scarf around your funnel." Thomas was only teasing, but Percy thought happily about scarves until the firelighter came. Meanwhile, Sir Topham Hatt was enjoying hot porridge for breakfast. He was looking forward to taking important visitors on a tour of the railway and had pressed his special trousers. "I shall put them in my trunk," Sir Topham Hatt said to his wife, "and change into them just before the photographs are taken." Then he set off to catch his train. Percy was now working hard. His fire was burning nicely, and he had plenty of steam, but still he thought about scarves. He saw them everywhere he went. "My funnel's cold! My funnel's cold!" he complained to Henry. "I want a scarf! I want a scarf!" "Rubbish, Percy," said Henry. "Engines don't need scarves." "Engines with proper funnels do," retorted Percy. "You've only got a small one." Before Henry could answer, Percy puffed away, still complaining, "I want a scarf! I want a scarf!" Henry snorted. He was proud of his short, neat funnel and was looking forward to pulling the special train. It was time for the photographs. Everyone was excited. Sir Topham Hatt was waiting anxiously on the platform for his trousers. They were in a trunk amongst a big load of baggage. 2 porters were taking the baggage trolley across the line. They were walking backwards to make sure that nothing fell off. Percy was on his way to collect the coaches and take them to the siding, and he was still being cheeky. His driver always shut off steam just outside the station. Percy wanted to surprise the coaches by coming in as quietly as he could. But the porters didn't hear him either, and when he came up, the trolley was on the line. Percy gave the porters such a fright that they jumped clear, and boxes and bags burst everywhere as the trolley disappeared with a crunch. "Oh!" groaned Percy. As he shut his eyes and stopped, he felt something sticky splash all over him, and he could hear crates crashing as they hit the ground, and more sticky plops all around him. When he opened his eyes again, he saw everything. Sticky streams of red and yellow jam trickled down Percy's face. A dented top hat hung on his lamp iron. Clothes, boots, shoes, skirts, and blouses stuck to his front. Worst of all, a pair of trousers coiled lovingly around his funnel. They were gray no longer. Then he saw the passengers. They were covered in jam too. Everyone was very angry as they looked at their broken trunks. Sir Topham Hatt seized the top hat. "Mine!" he shouted crossly. "Percy, look at this!" "Yes, sir, I am, sir," a muffled voice replied. "My best trousers, too." "Yes, sir, but please, sir," said Percy nervously. "I am very cross with you, Percy. We must now pay the passengers for their spoiled clothes. My hat is dented and my trousers are ruined. I hope this will teach you not to play tricks with the coaches." The driver unwound the trousers, but Sir Topham Hatt waved him away. "Percy wanted a scarf, so he can have my trousers for one. They will keep him warm for the day." Percy wore them back to the yard. He felt very silly. On the way, he met James. "Hello, Percy," he laughed. "So you found a scarf, eh? But legs go in trousers, not funnels." And he puffed away to tell Henry the news. That evening, Thomas and Percy were resting in the shed. Percy's driver had taken away the trousers and given Percy a good rub-down. "Firelighters promised to come early tomorrow," said Thomas. Just then, Henry arrived. He enjoyed taking the visitors around and now felt sorry for Percy, too. "Driver says the weather will be warmer tomorrow. You won't need a scarf anymore, Percy." "Certainly not," replied Percy. "Engines don't need scarves. Engines need warm boilers. Everyone knows that." He doesn't like scarves now. Percy's Promise. Every summer, the island of Sodor is very busy. Holidaymakers love to sightsee, and when the weather is fine, there is no better place to visit. Some people like to go to the mountains. Others like the valleys. Children love the seaside. One morning, Thomas was puffing along the line that runs by the coast. His two coaches, Annie and Clarabelle, were packed with children going to the beach. Everyone was happy. Percy was at the station, and he was preparing to take some freight cars to the harbor. "Hello, Thomas," he said. "You look cheerful. I wish I could take children today instead of freight cars." "They're the Vicar's Sunday School," explained Thomas. "I'm busy this evening, but the station master says that I can ask you to take the children home." "Of course I will," promised Percy. Later that day, Percy saw Harold at his airfield. "Sorry, Percy," he said. "Can't talk. I'm on high alert." "Why?" "Bad weather's due. My help is always needed. Mind how you go, Percy." "Pah!" huffed Percy. "As long as I've got my rails to run on, I can go anywhere, in any weather, anyhow. Goodbye." A little later, Percy met Edward at the next station. "Be careful," warned Edward. "There's a storm coming." "A promise is a promise," said Percy, "no matter what the weather." The children had a lovely day, but by tea time it was very hot and dark clouds loomed ahead. Then came lightning, thunder, and rain. The children only just managed to reach shelter just before the deluge began. Annie and Clarabelle stood at the platform. The children scrambled in. "Can we go home, station master, please?" asked the vicar. The station master called Percy. "Take the children home quickly, please," he ordered. The rain streamed down Percy's boiler. "Ugh!" he shivered and thought of his nice dry shed. And then he remembered. "Oh yes, a promise is a promise, no matter what the weather. So, here goes." Percy struggled on past coastal villages and into the countryside. His driver was anxious because the river was rising fast. It foamed and swirled fiercely, threatening to flood the country any minute. "I wish I could see! I wish I could see!" complained Percy as he battled against the rain beating on his face. More trouble lay ahead as they left the cutting and found themselves in water. "Oh, my wheels!" shivered Percy. "It's cold." But he struggled on. "Oh!" Whoosh! He hissed. The water is sloshing my fire! They stopped and backed the coaches to the cutting and waited while the conductor found a telephone. He returned looking gloomy. We couldn't go back if we wanted to, he said. The bridge near the junction is down. The fireman then went to the brake van coupled behind Clarabelle, carrying a hatchet. Hello, said the conductor. You look fierce. I need some dry wood for Percy's fire, please. They broke up some boxes in both the brake van and Clarabelle, but that did not satisfy the fireman. I'll have some of your floorboards then, please, he said to the conductor. I only swept the floor this morning, grumbled the conductor, but he still found a hatchet and helped. Soon they had plenty of wood stored in Percy's bunker. His fire was burning well now, and he felt warm and comfortable again. Then he saw Harold. Oh dear, thought Percy sadly. Harold's come to laugh at me. Then something thudded onto Percy's boiler. Ow! Exclaimed Percy in a muffled voice. That's really too bad. He needn't throw things. It's a parachute, laughed his driver as he unwound it from Percy's indignant front. Harold's not throwing things at you. He's merely dropping hot drinks for us. They all had a drink of cocoa and felt better. Percy had steam up now. Beep, beep. Thank you, Harold, he whistled. Good to be of service, replied Harold, and buzzed away. The water lapped Percy's wheels. Ah! He shivered. It crept up and up and up. It reached his ashpan, and then it sloshed at his fire. Percy was losing steam again, but he plunged bravely on. I promised, he panted. I promised. They piled his fire higher with wood and managed to keep him steaming. I must do it, he gasped. I must. He made one more big effort, and at last, exhausted but triumphant, he found himself on dry rails clear of the flood. He rested to get steam again, and then brought the train home. Well done, Percy, cheered Thomas, who was waiting there. You kept your promise, despite everything. 3 cheers for Percy, called the vicar, and the children nearly raised the roof. Sir Topham Hatt then arrived in Harold. First he thanked the men, then Percy. Harold told me you were a wizard. He says he can beat you at some things, but not at being a submarine. I don't know what you two have been playing at, and I won't ask, but I do know that you are a really useful engine. Oh, sir, whispered Percy happily.